I am speaking with our State Senator Bruce Tarr, as I do every week. Hi, Senator. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing well, Heather. Thanks. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
Good.
So we're going to start by talking about the change in COVID rules.
Yeah, and this is very significant, Heather, because the numbers are heading in a positive direction. Actually, I was on the phone with Governor Baker just a little while ago this afternoon, and he was talking about the fact that our rates of positivity of tests and our rates of hospitalization and our rates of folks in intensive care are all dropping with regard to COVID-19. And so clearly we have a long way to go. We're talking right now on Monday, and so as of 5 a.m. this morning, the stay-at-home advisory has been lifted, and the requirement that businesses close at 9:30 p.m. has been lifted. Now, all of the other restrictions remain in place, but we are moving in a positive direction, and I think that's worthy of recognition.
I have to ask, though, so many people are frustrated by the vaccine, including the Senate president. Do you want to comment on that?
Absolutely, and in fact, I had a conversation with her as well as the governor this afternoon about that. There is a lot of communication that needs to be improved. Let me put it that way with regard to vaccinations. We're getting a lot of calls in the office. I know my colleagues are as well, about why people are in certain categories, where they can get a vaccine, when they can get a vaccine. And part of the problem, and I actually was speaking with the Speaker of the House this afternoon, and he was indicating that he thought part of the problem was that different states have different plans. There is no unified plan. So folks see on the news that tomorrow in another state, somebody who's 65 can get vaccinated. And so they say, well, why can't I get vaccinated in Massachusetts? And so that's a lot of the confusion that's happening. Now, there is more information that's going to be forthcoming. The administration is working on a better system to be able to communicate what's going on. But I would point out this. Regardless of how much we improve the availability of information, an underlying problem is still the availability of the vaccine itself. And so the governor has been very clear that we need many more doses than we're getting. Now, given what the Biden administration is saying about prioritizing increased production, we're hopeful that we're going to get more, but we need more to be able to reach our goals. But short of that, we definitely need to have better communication, and those things are underway. Now, a couple things we do know. Number one, phase one is well underway, and everybody in phase one should now be able to get vaccinated. Phase two is going to begin on February 1st, which is good news. And that brings in another cohort of people that are very important, including those who are seniors under different conditions. And I don't mean to be vague about that, but I don't want to be specific and misstate it. So we're going to be providing information on our social media about that. And I know that the website, mass.gov, is going to have more information. But the good news is phase one is moving along. Phase two is about to begin. And those are positive things. But we need to do better with information, and we need to get more doses.
Well, let's move on. You wanted to talk to us about the budget.
Yeah, a couple of interesting things that are happening legislatively. Governor Baker and Lieutenant Governor Polito are required to file their budget for the upcoming fiscal year on Wednesday, and they will be filing it on Wednesday. And three important things to think about in that budget that we already know. Number one, the House, the Senate, and the administration have agreed that we are going to use a revenue number that projects a 3.5% increase over the coming fiscal year, which is positive. Now, we have to remember that that 3.5% increase is on a lower base because we lowered the number to be able to close last year's budget, or actually the current fiscal year's budget, but it still is growth, and that's very significant. And that growth translates in the governor's budget into two important things that we know about already. Number one, the governor is going to propose that we fully fund the first year of the Student Opportunity Act, which is the education funding bill, now law, that we had passed that had its implementation delayed because of COVID-19. The governor and his administration believe we're in a position now to actually start the process of implementing the Student Opportunity Act. So they're going to propose that we fully fund the first year of it. In addition to that, the practice of this administration has been to tie increases in local aid, which is known more formally as unrestricted general government aid, also called UGA. And this administration has tied UGA to the rate of increase in revenue. And they're proposing to do that in their budget that will be filed in a couple of days. And so good news for cities and towns is if we're able to hold those numbers, local aid will be going up by 3.5%. We'll find out a lot more over the next couple of days.
Good news for local people and good news for students. That's great. So let's talk now about filing bills.
So the governor is going to file his major bill of the year on Wednesday, but legislators have their hard at work getting our bills ready. And so we have a bill filing deadline. It would normally have been the second week in January, it'd be right around now when we're talking, but we extended it because of the circumstances that we've been facing with the pandemic. And so we now have until February 19th. So legislators are working very hard to put together the bills they want to file for the 2-year session that we just entered. Now, it's important to understand you can still file a bill after that deadline. However, if you file it before the deadline in a timely way, it must get a public hearing and it must be considered. If you file it after the deadline, both the House and the Senate have to vote to admit the bill. Now, they usually do that, but it's really important to go into the legislative session with an agenda, with the bills that you want to focus on, obviously knowing anything can change. So legislators right now, all 200, are working very hard at writing bills and getting them ready for filing. And then once they're filed, there'll be a period of co-sponsorship where we reach out and ask our colleagues to co-sponsor our bills. So it's a lot of activity right now on Beacon Hill.
So do you have a running list of bills that you're planning on filing at all times?
We do. We keep a list not only of the bills that we're going to file, but once they're filed, we track them in a database to be able to follow them. And I will say, very rarely does a bill get passed in the way that it gets filed. So in the legislative process, there are transformations, there are changes, additions, subtractions, and that happens in almost every case. And that's why it's important that we track them so we can watch those transformations as the process goes forward. And that's why, you know, sometimes we'll be asked the question, do you support X or Y bill? And oftentimes we'll give a qualified response that we either support it or don't support it as it's currently written, because oftentimes it can dramatically change by the time it gets to the governor's desk. And as we know from recent experience, it can change even after it gets to the governor's desk.
Right. Well, on that note, do you want to have one final comment about the governor's veto of the climate bill?
Yeah, the governor identified some issues that he and his administration have with the climate bill. I do think it's important to remember that the administration and the legislature generally agree on the subjects of that bill. But there are some significant issues that the governor has raised, and my hope is that we're going to be able to work those out over time. I anticipate that we're going to see the climate bill actually this week in the legislature. We've adopted some temporary rules that will allow us to take it up. And I think folks are very eager to move the process along, to get to the stage where we can actually negotiate between the parties and get to a good resolution. I will say, having looked at some of the governor's concerns, I think they're very legitimate. I think they're very important. And I hope that we can find a way to work them out, because we all want to be able to address the issues of climate and climate change.
Well, we look forward to talking to you next week.
And next week, we'll be able to talk more about what's in the governor's budget. Again, he'll be giving his State of the State address on Wednesday evening. He generally files the budget almost coterminously with that address. And so we'll have a lot to talk about, because as we've discussed, budgets don't only include spending. They also often include policy changes.
Great. Well, we will see you next week.
We'll see you then. Thank you so much.
Thank you.